We're in section 1.6 and we're doing our first constructions. And like I said, we're going to do four constructions today. The first one's really easy. We're going to copy a segment. So I'm going to start out with a segment. Any segment. There's my segment. Now when I make a copy, when I make the copy, we want it to be the same, everything the same size, same length. So what would we call the segment once we make it a copy? Congruent. Very nice. So we're making a congruent segment. So to copy a segment, I'm going to start with a point. That's going to be one endpoint of my segment. Grab my compass. Set one end of my compass on the end of the segment I want to copy. Open up the compass as wide as my segment. So now it's open, the same length. Now I'm going to take it over here, set it on there, and I need to move my point over. So let me, my compass is going to go away. So I'm going to move my point over here. So open up my compass, set it down on either end, it can go either direction, and then I'm going to draw a little arc, leaving the compass open. Get rid of the compass, and then I would use a straight edge, a ruler, something, to draw a straight segment between the points and the arc that I made. And there's a segment that's exactly the same length as the one I wanted to have before. So I've made a congruent segment. So let me do that one again. Make a shorter segment this time. So I have a segment here. I want to copy it. So I'm going to start with a point. This is going to be one end of my new segment. Grab my compass, set it on my segment, open it up to the length of the segment, move it down here, draw an arc, and then connect that point to the arc in a straight line. And it can go anywhere on that arc. And now I have a segment that's the same length. So that's how I'm going to copy a segment. What if the problem asked me to make a segment that was twice as long as this one? How could I do that? What is it? Make two, just back to back. You just make two of them back to back. I would put one here and another one right next to it, back to back. So that's to make a segment twice the length. I just make two, one right next to each other. So copy a segment. That's the easiest construction that we're going to do. And we use this construction for lots of different things. So that one's pretty easy. Next thing we want to do is copy an angle. We want to make a congruent angle. So we'll start with an angle. So here's my angle. And I want to copy it. Now, does it matter Does it matter how long the rays are? Does that change how big the angle is? What's all that matters for how big the angle is? Does it? So if I make the sides really, really long, it doesn't matter what. When we're talking about the size of the angle, what are we talking about? How do we measure an angle? How many degrees? We're only worried about how far it's open. So to copy an angle, we're only worried about how far it's open. We're not worried about how long the sides are. So to copy an angle, my first step is going to be, I'm just going to draw one side of my new angle down here. It can be any length. So I'm just going to draw a segment using a ruler. So we're going to draw a new side of the angle. Now I'm going to grab my compass, put it on the vertex of my angle, and make an arc through both sides. Doesn't matter how big the arc is, it just has to go through both sides of the angle. Yes?
Does it matter like how far up or down on the angle?
Nope, I can make it anywhere. The trick is I'm going to take my compass, leave it exactly where it is, and set it down here and draw the same arc. So this arc and this arc are the same. So I just drew an arc, any arc, but then what I did was picked my compass up, brought it down here, and drew the exact same arc. Now I'm going to take my compass and put the point here where the arc goes through the angle. Move it over here and put the other point where the arc goes through the angle on the other side. So I'm measuring now how far open the angle is. And I'm going to take my compass down here, put it in the exact same place, put the point where the arc crosses, and then draw an arc. Move my compass and connect the vertex to that little cross that I made. And now I've made an angle that's exactly the same size as the other angle. This one's not, they get more complicated. This one's not too bad. So what we did here, this is kind of like copying the segment. We make this arc and we open our compass into the same opening. So let me do that one again. Here's my angle. I'll make it just a little different this time. I'll make it a little bigger. I want to copy that angle. So I'm going to draw one side of my new angle. Doesn't matter how I draw it. This is going to be one side of my new angle. And here's my vertex. So I'm going to grab my compass, and let's do this one in blue. Put the point on the vertex of the angle. I can draw any arc. It just has to go through both sides of my angle. Now I'm going to come down here, put the point on the vertex, and I'm going to draw that same arc. So I've got that arc here, same arc here. Take my compass back up here, put the point where the arc crosses the side of the angle, and put the other point where the arc crosses on the other side. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. Put the point where the arc crosses, and I'm going to draw that arc. Where they cross, I'm going to connect my vertex to that little X. And there's my angle that's exactly the same as this angle. And if I got my protractor, I could measure these, and I would see that they'd be pretty close to the same measure. So what I'd be looking for on a quiz or a test when we ask you to do this construction is I would want to see that you did your construction, made your arc with a compass, you drew your arc, and you have the little X that you made with the arc with the compass, and that you've got an angle that's more or less the same size as the previous angle. So I'm going to ask the same question. How would we make an angle that was twice as big as this angle? We would construct it twice. So I would make this angle, and then I would construct another angle with this as the side over here. So I'd just make it twice back to back. And I would have an angle that was twice as big as this angle. All right, so we have copy a segment and copy an angle. So we know how to make congruent segments. We know how to make congruent angles. Now we're going to talk about bisecting. We know how to make them the same. Now we want to cut them in half. We want to bisect a segment. Our construction to bisect a segment, what we're actually going to construct is what we call a perpendicular bisector. So first off, let's remember, what did we say bisect meant? Cut in half. So we want to cut our segment in half. Perpendicular means it makes a 90-degree angle. So we're going to construct a segment that makes a 90-degree angle with the segment that we start with, and it cuts it in half. So perpendicular bisector means it's a 90-degree angle and cuts it in half. So we're going to start with a segment. Here's my segment. I want to make the perpendicular bisector. So the problem might ask you to bisect the segment. It might ask you to construct the perpendicular bisector. So there's my segment. We are going to call this, I'm going to call this this construction this one doesn't have a special name. Okay. I'm going to grab my compass, set it on one end of my segment, set the point on one end. I'm going to open it more than halfway across the segment. So this isn't far enough. This isn't far enough. It has to be more than halfway across. Doesn't matter how much more, it just has to be more than halfway across. And I'm going to draw that arc. And I want to go all the way, make almost a half circle. So I open more than halfway across, and then drew that arc. I'm not going to change the setting on my compass. I'm going to go over to the other side of the segment and draw the same arc. Move the compass, and then I'm going to connect where those two arcs cross. That cuts this segment right in half, and we have a 90-degree angle. So for perpendicular bisector, the key is to open it more than halfway. That's usually what let's say, remember, that's the one where we open it more than halfway. All right, let's do that one again. I'll do it sideways this time. Here's my segment. Doesn't matter how the segment's situated. We want to make the perpendicular bisector. Grab my compass. Do it in red this time. Set it on one end of the segment. It's got to be open more than halfway across. This is not far enough. That's not far enough. More than halfway across. Draw an arc, almost a half circle. take the compass to the other side of the segment, put the point on the end of the segment, and I draw the same arc. Connect those two X's. And there's my perpendicular bisect. I'll cut that segment in half at a 90-degree angle. All right, questions on that construction? All right, our last one. We want to bisect an angle. This one's just a touch more complicated, but it's not bad. So we're going to cut an angle in half. So here's my angle. So to bisect an angle, we start almost like we did when we copied an angle. I'm going to take my compass and I'm just going to draw an arc across both sides of the angle. Doesn't matter how big it is, just has to go across both sides. So kind of like we did when we copied an angle. Now I'm going to move the point of the compass to where the arc crosses the angle. And this time I need to open the compass more than halfway across the angle. So not far enough, not far enough, more than halfway across. Make an arc here. Move the point to the other side where the arc crosses the angle. And make an arc there. Now I'm going to connect with a straight line the vertex with where those two cross. And there's my bisect. I've bisected the angle. And when I do this, this is congruent to that. Question?
So how did you do the last one? The little one?
So what I did, let me grab the compass again. For the first one, I set my compass here, and I measured more than halfway across, and I made that arc. Okay. I left the compass set exactly where it was, and I put it over on this side where the arc crosses on that side, and then made the same arc. Okay. So it's almost like we did with the perpendicular bisector, except we do it to the angle instead of the segment. So let's do that one again. There's my angle. I want to bisect this angle, so I grab my compass, set the point on the vertex, and I just make any arc through the angle, through both sides. Like so. Doesn't matter how big this arc is, just any one through both sides. Now I set the point where the arc crosses the angle, and my compass needs to be open more than halfway across. Not enough, not enough. That's enough. Make that arc. Move the point to the other side where the arc crosses the angle. I drew an entire circle there for me. And then I connect the vertex to where those two arcs cross. And that's my bisect. Now with a segment or with an angle, what if I wanted to find an angle that was 1/4 the size of my original angle? What would I have to do?
You have to do after you make you have to bisect, to make my section.
Yes, perfect. So I would bisect this one, and then I would bisect the smaller angle. And when I bisected the smaller angle, I'm cutting the half in half. Half of a half is a fourth. So that's how I could find a fourth of the angle, is bisect and bisect again. Same with the angle and with the segment. If I cut this half from here to here, or from here to here, if I cut that half in half, I would have a quarter of the segment. If I can divide it into half, quarter, eighth, I can do any of those. All right, so those are our 4 constructions. Copy a segment, copy an angle, bisect a segment, perpendicular bisector, and bisect an angle. So any of those 4 could be on your quiz on Monday. Any of those 4 could be on the test at the end of the unit. And you will need to, on the test, you will need to use a compass to do your constructions. We buy compasses every year. Last year we spent like $200 and some odd on compasses. Beginning of this year we have 0. They all disappeared. So we don't have compasses to lend. We've tried and tried, and every year they all disappear. So let me stop this.